In this episode of OG 55, we are joined by our friend Matthew Murr talking about the Walt Disney Company succession, hurdles, obstacles. We got a ton to talk about today. It's going to be a fantastic show up next on OG 55.
May I have your attention, please?
Welcome to OG 55. So today we are joined by a very special guest, friend of the channel, Mr. Matthew Murr, all the way across the pond in the UK. But before we dive into the topic today, which is the Walt Disney Company succession, we are going to introduce my fantastic panel. We're going to start off with Mr. Vashkai, host of the Freshly Squeezed show here on the channel, the DA, Dr. Dre, the producer, the man who wears many hats. Back in the house. Dre, love you, brother. If you can let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, my friend.
Thank you. Glad to be of service. Best place to find me is going to be at Vashkai on Twitter. It's right down there, just like it's spelled. Go ahead and type that in. It should pop up. Who we're going to be talking about today, I'm sure Christine Wastelands McCarthy would say, for all the
robust
discussion right there. You go ahead and find me there. If you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55, or we have shows like the one you're watching, the original. What is it? Unbreaded, unseasoned, the original, the classic,
Unplugged.
55, right? Right? Citrus Corner, Orange Nerd, and of course my show, Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice, news, and info, squeezed fresh, right from the Grove. I haven't played this one in a while, so I'm going to go ahead and play it.
But really nothing compares with a freshly squeezed.
I do agree. I don't know. Fantastic drop right there. But we also have somebody else very special on the panel today. OG. Who is that, sir?
Well, it is Mr. Matthew Murr. He's a friend of the channel. For those of you that are fans of OG 55, you have probably seen Matthew in the chat on the live shows. He is a huge supporter of the channel. We love Matthew. He has family here on the channel. Matthew Murr coming all the way across the pond from the UK. Matthew, welcome aboard, brother. If you can kind of introduce yourself. Oh, it is absolutely our pleasure, Matthew. If you can let everybody at home know where they can find you on social media, my friend.
Well, sadly, my Twitter address is quite lengthy, so maybe could you put it in the description when we finish recording?
That absolutely. In the show notes down below, description, I will link Matthew's Twitter. He does have a lot of numbers in there and everything. So it might be easier, you're right, Matthew, just to go ahead and check that out down below. But definitely follow him. He is a huge friend of the channel, of us personally. We love Matthew. So give him a follow. But Matthew, if you want to give the audience a little background on yourself to kind of give them an idea about what's your passion, why you're here, stuff like that.
Disney is without question one of my biggest passions because I have a massive passion for the entertainment industry and I have done all my life. And my passion for Disney peaked in 2021 and it's just been stayed that way ever since. I don't think I've ever been so passionate about it. And I hate to take on the title Disney adult, but I really am one of those.
Hey, you know what, Matthew? There's nothing wrong with being a Disney adult, and I do love your passion. If you follow him on Twitter, you can see that, with Matthew. He's very, very passionate about this. And I can connect with you, Matthew, on that. I'm very passionate myself. I've gotten into arguments on Twitter before. I've been very passionate about things before on videos before. I know how that feels, that passion for this company, for this legacy that Walt kind of left us. And that's why I love you, brother, because I can definitely understand where you are coming from with that, my friend. But without further ado, we're going to talk about succession of the Walt Disney Company. It's a hot topic right now because you know what? Bobby Iger came back on November 20th and said, hey, I'm here to kind of right the ship a little bit, get the company back on track. But one of my number one priorities is finding a replacement in 2 years, which not going to happen. But, he says 2 years. He says 2 years, but we all know it's going to be a little longer. but that's his priority, is to find a replacement, a successor to him, right? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about who we think is going to get the job, who we hope to get the job, some wild cards. We're just going to have a great conversation about it. Dre, I'm going to start with you, sir. In terms of the Walt Disney Company succession, now I know we're early. Bob Iger's only been back for like a little over a month, barely, maybe 5 weeks. A little early, but where we stand right now, December of 2022, who do you feel is the leading contender, the leading candidate to succeed Bob Iger in 2 years?
Well, if you went by what the media narrative is going around, you might think it might be Christine Wastelands McCarthy, which
and there's the biggest bargain of all.
That's right, OG. That's exactly it. You want to go ahead and share my screen real fast, and we can see some of the players, right?
There we go.
This wonderful graphic that OG
Our
is
candidates.
kind enough to put together here. Our candidates, right? Yep, Bob Iger sitting in the middle, but flanked around him, Tom Staggs, Christine Wastelands McCarthy, Dana Walden. I believe that's Kevin Meyer over her shoulder.
Yeah,
is that right?
Like my right, like far right, is Kevin Meyer. Yeah,
I wasn't sure who that woman on the right was.
That's Kevin Meyer.
But you noted somebody of particular interest also in this that maybe is one of the unsung players largely. OG, you want to go ahead and fill us in on who that other person featured in this photo is?
Yeah, right above Mickey Mouse is a gentleman named James Pitaro. Okay, he is the head of ESPN. Now, his name has been circulated in the trades for even before Bob Iger took over. I saw his name being kind of circulated as a possible contender for Disney CEO. Now, this is interesting, especially with the rumors and the kind of buzz around ESPN lately that it might get sold off. Disney might offload ESPN and ABC. And well, Mr. Pitaro is the head of ABC. So how does that all figure in, right?
What's
very, very interesting.
What's really interesting about that is I was informed via VR and WW Pro that they were suggesting that ESPN might not be sold off, but spinned off, which or spin off. Okay, you get what I'm saying, right?
And now, if you can clarify, Dre, for our audience, what that distinction would mean, like in terms of selling off versus being spun off. What would that mean exactly?
Spun off, yeah. Okay, that's the one. Look, listen, we all messed up a little bit here, and honestly, I've messed up 2 times. One with the pronunciation, but 2, also too with the terminology at issue here. Spun off is separate from sold off in distinction that spinning off the ESPN brand or entity would de facto create its own entity, its own standalone company that Disney might have a financial interest remaining in still, versus selling it off to another corporate entity entirely. That is kind of the difference here. And that's where the nomenclature, I will admit, kind of tricked me up. But, according to, VR and WW Pro, they seem to be pretty bullish that Disney wouldn't completely divest themselves of their interests within ESPN. It would just stand alone, which is an interesting thing. Maybe if Pitaro here remains the head of ESPN and really thrives in that role, I don't know. Maybe he would still be a potential candidate here. Maybe even more so than some of these other people for having led a company on its own already.
That's a great point, Dre. Yeah, if you spin it off where it's like ESPN is its own company. Now, Disney, like you said, Disney would have interest invested in that company, this new form company. But if Pitaro is running, if Pitaro is essentially the CEO of this new ESPN spun off company, yeah, that gives him a little bit more of street cred, so to speak, in regards to running a major company. He is essentially the CEO then of ESPN. He's not just a head; he is a CEO. So that's very interesting. Matthew, what do you think about this, sir?
I think I honestly think it is fairly unlikely because ESPN isn't like the bread and butter of Disney, and I don't think it's one of their core divisions that even Iger has seen much value in. I think the only person who really saw much value in ESPN was probably Chapek.
Yeah, Chapek really saw a lot of value in ESPN with the whole like sports betting thing. Now, a lot of fans are not too happy with sports betting. They don't feel it really fits the Disney branding. I'm kind of at issue with that a little bit because I don't think that ESPN is under any obligation necessarily to kind of fit the parameters of the Disney branding. Like for example, look, if you're making Tinkerbell movies, yes, you got to work within the Disney parameter, right? ESPN isn't that. ESPN is Deadpool. ESPN is this kind of this ancillary thing where it's like it should be consistent with the values and the expectation of the fans of that franchise. And sports fans expect, stuff like this, sports betting and what have you. And if Disney's going to own a company that is all in on sports, you got to kind of like dive into that sports world. You can't like Disneyfy sports just because Disney have to. Yeah, just because Disney owns it. What do you think, Dre, in terms of that? The sports betting and that whole world.
ESPN was always positioned at arm's length, kind of separate from the Disney company for those reasons, in order so that it could better appeal to its core audience, right? And it wouldn't be Disney-fied in the same way that some of the other divisions are. This is very similar to kind of Miramax's setup, where it was positioned in a way that it wouldn't directly connect to the Disney brand. Touchstone followed a similar suit. So I believe you can still pursue those interests with ESPN under the Disney umbrella, but not necessarily connected to the core brand itself. And I think that's what Chapek was looking to do and looking to achieve. But also, too, I mean, from his standpoint, I understand he's not there anymore, but I think his words still hold a lot of truth to them in this regard, in that I think a lot of people who were part of the sports world were looking for that and actually expected it, and looked at the whole sports betting thing differently than some of the kind of legacy thought around this whole thing, or legacy perception around this whole thing. That still doesn't, obviously, I don't think, warrant that kind of behavior to be absorbed into the core identity of Disney. However, with respect to the fact that it's at arm's length right now, I think it can absolutely be part of ESPN's brand for sure. The question really is Bob Iger going to pursue that? And this is kind of what we were talking about before. I think when we brought this original story up, I believe in a live stream. Where does this kind of plan go now? I'm not sure. I think with ESPN lacking a global presence, I think it's all about maximizing the presence that you have, and that's largely North America. And one of those things that is afforded to you in the North American market is sports betting. I think you do have to pursue that. If not, yeah, it might make sense to spin it off. But I will also concede that it likely has a lot of value still left in it. So it's one of those back and forths that I think the financial community is having right now.
Yeah, no, 100%. This is the thing. I do not envy Bob Iger right now. This is not an easy task. I mean, all these problems he has are like major problems. This is not like deciding what you're gonna have for breakfast here. I mean, this is major stuff. Like spinning off ESPN, selling off ESPN would be a major deal for the Walt Disney Company, a major issue for them. And it's just like you can't take something like this too lightly. So I don't know. I really don't.
Oh, go ahead. I wonder if that's part of the qualification process. Just getting back to the Disney Succession thing here for just a little bit. I don't know what the evaluation process will be. With respect to what Bob Iger might be seeing in a potential candidate. But maybe that's part of the evaluation process, is asking these potential suitors for this role. Hey, what would you do with this? What would you do here? You know, that kind of thing, and really getting their feedback. And hey, maybe it will take not only a good somebody with a good business acumen, but honestly a creative visionary that can turn these things around. Maybe that is also one of the potential qualifiers for this CEO position.
Yeah, no, 100%. What do you think about that, Matthew? What do you think about that? Like where Bob Iger and the board kind of goes to each of these candidates and sort of asks them, what's your solution to
they would
problem?
probably have to speak to each of them one by one,
right,
and see who they favoured the most. And I honestly think they might not have their eyes on Bataro.
Yeah, no, they might not. And again, these are all rumors, and these are just names thrown out there in the trades and what have you. They might not have their eye on Pitaro. Absolutely. And, you know, Pitaro, from what I understand, I mean, he's running a sports network, but what does he know about theme parks? What does he know about DTC, direct to consumer, or more importantly, really, like, what does he know about the Disney brand, right? Yeah. So that's all for working against Pitaro for sure as a candidate.
And he's also, I mean, you know, I'm sympathetic to some of the arguments that Pitaro has made regarding ESPN in the past, suggesting that you know, that ESPN might want to get, you know, they got a little bit too far into the societal and some of the political issues at play in mass media and so forth, and they really had to take a step back maybe from that and get back to what their core audience wants, which is you know, sports related content with maybe some what is it overlap with some societal issues, but not very deep, right?
So what you're saying, Dre, is do the opposite of this.
Apologize for not being the ally that you needed me to be.
Yeah, probably don't do that, all right? Because you know, and look, it was showing up. I think in the data, it was showing up in the research that they were pushing some of their core audience away with, you know, having so many shows deal with some of those issues, right? And so to bring the ESPN brand back into focus, I think has been one of Pitaro's strong points. But I think it's also maybe why Bob Iger himself might not be considering somebody of that of that ilk, because, well, I mean, you know, Bob Iger has made comments about, well, you know, a CEO has got to, you know, take sides on issues and speak out for certain issues, even if it puts their business in danger and so forth. And it's like, whoa, that's some strong language there. He's also had some recent comments regarding subjects like 2A and so forth. And it's, you know, when you see Pitaro, who is maybe a little bit more business minded, a little more business focused, you know, that probably you know, takes him off the short list. But hey, I might be wrong. Dana Walden here, it's an interesting candidate as well.
Yeah, Dana Walden is the next candidate we're going to talk about here. She is, for those that are not aware, Dana Walden is actually a kind of a new hire, so to speak. She came over with the Fox acquisition a few years ago, and I believe it was 2019. And she is chairman of Disney General Entertainment Content of the Walt Disney Company. Now, go ahead and read you. This is from the official Walt Disney Company website to give you a little background, audience, onto what Dana Walden is all about. Dana Walden is the chairman of Disney General Entertainment Content, overseeing the creation of original entertainment and news programming for the company's streaming platforms Disney Plus, Hulu, and Star, and its broadcasting cable networks. Walden is responsible for an extensive portfolio of content brands, including ABC Entertainment, ABC News, Disney Branded Television, Freeform, FX, Hulu, Nat Geo, and Onyx Collective. I have no idea what Onyx Collective is. That's news to me. She also oversees Disney Television Studios, which includes 20th Century Television, 20th Century Animation. Shout out to Family Guy. I love you. And ABC Signature and the Walt Disney Television Alternative. So Walden is actually overseeing quite a bit.
And those were also Peter Rice's roles, I believe, at the end there, right? So she absorbed those duties under her right there, which it gives her, or at least provides her, a very unique talent skill set in which a lot of these executives that are up for consideration right now, I think, lack, to be quite honest. Their linear business is a huge part of their business, and we'll get into how consequential that is, especially going forward in the next couple of years. But Matthew, what do you think about Dana Walden here? You know, she's, again, one of these kind of unsung figures. We don't really hear much about her, but I absolutely do think that she is up for consideration right now.
I actually think she'd be good
Really?
as a potential CEO, because at least she has run an actual studio before, or had some experience in it compared to Pitaro, and not to mention she could get some. We've actually got former Parks chief, I think his name is Jay Rasulo, still on the board, so he could potentially provide some assistance for her with the transition from entertainment content chief to CEO.
Hey, look, Matthew, I agree with you. I think Dana Walden is a strong contender for CEO, and look, we've learned a lesson sort of with Bob Chapek, right? don't pick a theme park guy, basically, right? No, I'm just kidding. But like, Disney historically has a tendency to sort of pick these like studio-driven executives to run the company. It's always been that way. I mean, Walt himself was a studio guy. All his guys that were working on all his guys that he picked for Imagineering were studio guys. Mark Davis, all these guys were from the studio side, Michael Eisner, Frank Wells, studio side. Disney has a lot of success kind of picking from that side of the company, right? And that industry. And I think that with Bob Chapek, he was more seen as like a theme park guy. I really do believe that was really an issue for Hollywood at large. They didn't like that. They didn't like a theme park guy coming in and telling Hollywood what to do. Well,
or
Dana
even just
Walden,
a home video guy.
Yeah, I know. It's weird because he did start in home video, but for some reason it was like he was really known as more of a park guy.
Retail
Dana Walden.
guy.
Oh, what guy? I'm sorry.
Retail guy, not in the content creation space, but from the content retail space. That was kind of the major charge against Chapek his entire tenure.
No, exactly. And Dana Walden is much more traditional Hollywood. Look at her resume. Look at the first paragraph of her bio on the WaltDisneyCompany.com website.
Right.
It's all studio. It's FX and 20th Century Fox and Disney Plus and Disney Animation TV. It's all studio. I think that number one, look, let's be honest. That's what we do here on OG55, right? The Walt Disney Company right now is very much all about diversity, inclusion. Okay. So being a woman definitely is in Dana Walden's favor. Let's just say that.
Absolutely.
Right now. I mean, as opposed to being a white guy. Okay.
No, it
this is the truth, Oh,
I remember 10 years ago now when the company, when they had just acquired Lucasfilm, was considering, what happens beyond Bob Iger. And one of the heavy considerations for the next CEO position at that time was Kathleen Kennedy, of all people. Why? Because, she was this famous producer, had been attached to all these big film projects, was seemingly doing very well with Star Wars, and Disney.
Then The Last Jedi happened.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, you're not too far off, Matthew. As soon as those kind of films came out, particularly not only Last Jedi but Solo, it was like, okay, maybe we should take a step back here. But the company itself, even back then, saw itself as a very progressive company, and this would have, reflected its values as a progressive company as they label themselves as being. So I do think that's still in the air a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's why I think not only Dana Walden, but Kristen Wastelands McCarthy has shot up to the top list.
Yeah.
Even though she is herself a very much an outsider, whereas Dana Walden is kind of an insider, is kind of born and bred within this kind of Hollywood system. And now that, you have David Zaslav, right, plugging out talent, Comcast, doing some similar things there, I think the entire Hollywood or entertainment industry has, after seeing the Chapek experiment or whatever we're calling it, right? And by the way, his words.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. Okay. All right. But now that Hollywood has kind of had time to assess the Chapek experiment, assess how that all went down, there does seem to be a renewed interest in the cultivation of relationships within Hollywood and how that is a key part of your business. And Dana Walden definitely fits that profile of somebody, I think, who has not only established relationships, but can cultivate new ones in the future.
100%. And here's the thing. I want to make it very clear. I am not against a woman leading the Walt Disney Company. I would be absolutely comfortable where I stand right now, at least knowing what I know about Dana, for her to be the top contender for this role. I think Dana is very much qualified. Maybe outside of, and we'll get to him in a minute, but outside of like Tom Staggs, she's probably on my top 2 or 3, to be honest with you. I very much, I like her. I like her a lot from what I know. Again, something might surface in a week or 2 or a month from now, it might change my mind. But as of right now, I do like her. But Disney needs to kind of like pick the right person. Yeah. And if that means it's a woman, that means it's a dreaded white male or someone else, then that's fine. But they just have, Bob Iger and the board needs to pick the right person who's the most well-rounded, has a vision in line with the Walt Disney Company, understands the culture. That's what they need to do. And if it's a male, if it's a female, if it's from any race, background, whatever, that's great. But you have to go with the person and their qualifications and their vision first. Okay. Disney, don't get too wrapped up in the optics of like whether it's a male or a female or this race or that race. Get more wrapped up into the vision, the ideas, and the background, the resume. That's what we got to worry about. Well,
we just had Bob Chapek, who was
a straight white male.
right. But some people view it as unqualified, and some people view as having not gone off or put in the role on the best foot possible, and it was really a setup for failure, right?
Yeah.
My concern with going with somebody who is as not qualified as possible is that you're setting them up for failure, no matter who they are.
Right.
And so we have to be mindful of that, just because optically it might look some way, and it might be a good feeling thing. You might be doing that person a disservice, along with the entire company, who has a lot of people that they had to report to, and are responsible for.
Well said, brother. That's exactly it. Now, right above Dana, we have Christine Waistlines McCarthy. Okay. Now, I was singing Dana's praises. Okay, Dana, if you're watching, I'm rooting for you, girl. You so far, you're looking like a really good candidate. Waistlines McCarthy, not so much. Waistlines McCarthy, I've said it before, and Dre, I know you got to concur with me on this. I'm sure Matthew does as well. She comes with a lot of the same baggage that Bob Chapek came with, right? Mm-hmm. She's unlikable, let's be honest. More business minded. I mean, come on, she's a CFO, okay?
Right.
She's a gaffe master. She's made a lot of gaffes that have angered the fan community and what have you. She's got no experience with Hollywood. Really, I mean, even less experience with creatives than Bob Chapek did. I mean, at least Bob Chapek had like the home video experience. He had the theme park experience and what have you. He had even retail experience. From what I understand, McCarthy has none of that even. She's been purely in the accounting department of the company forever.
Yeah. She's basically Disney's counterpart of Liz Truss.
Of what? I'm sorry?
Liz Truss, former British Prime Minister, just before or just after Boris Johnson, but just before Rishi Sunak.
Right, exactly. And it's like, I look, if you're gonna pick McCarthy, you should you might as well just stay with Bob J-Beck at this point. Well, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Matthew, you seem to have a pretty strong reaction to when I even mentioned her name. Matthew, go ahead and why don't you go ahead and air your thoughts and maybe grievances out.
Punches with her. She's completely passionless. All she cares about is the money. And she honestly seems rather callous because of her waistlines remark.
Right.
Because if she really did care about visitors' health, she would introduce more healthy offerings.
That's 100% true. She doesn't care. She doesn't care. Let's be honest. She doesn't care. And look, I'll be fair to McCarthy. As a CFO,
she's fine.
You're fine. Yeah, she's fine. In that lane, she's fine. If she wants to remain the CFO, OG's on board with that. I'm okay with that. She's been with the company for 20 plus years. She's always been in that lane. Fine. Stay CFO. We're good, McCarthy. We love you, girl. But you come into CEO, I have a little bit of an issue with that because you don't understand Hollywood. You don't understand creatives. The fans hate you. I mean, to be honest, they don't like her. It's Chapek all over again. And it's like Iger would really be... God, Iger, don't make that mistake again. Just don't.
Please don't.
And that's the problem, right? Bob Iger, I don't know what his qualification process is, but it's certainly not great. If you've seen the history of his personal choices regarding C-suite, it hasn't all been, roses and dandelions, right? It's been thorny. Let's just say that it's been thorny. And Christine Waysons McCarthy, having been attached to the accounting facilities for Disney for so long, I mean, I don't want to generalize her, but she's probably very bottom line oriented in her mind and philosophy, right?
Absolutely.
And that's not the great. I mean, again, when times are good, maybe that's something right there, but does that necessarily set you up for success through growth? Through expanding the business, expanding the portfolio, approving certain projects, and so forth. I don't really see how you can necessarily position the company for that. And we kind of saw that with Chapek, right? He didn't really position the company for growth, or at least he didn't have the ability to do so with his very short time in the CEO position. But he was very much about making cuts. Strategizing ways to kind of leverage their the industries that they were already in order to increase yields, increase profit potential, revenue, and so forth like that. But where's the visionary to get you into even more industries? Where is the vision to position the company on the path forward to extended growth and financial success? I think Christine Waysons McCarthy is definitely cut from that kind of Chapek ilk, which it can be pretty good in the short run, but in the long run, where are we going to be at right there? I think that's the thing that I'm most worried about when it comes to Christine Waysons McCarthy. Matthew, do you have similar feelings?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. But also, more importantly, this is really going to test my faith, I think, in Susan Arnold as chairman of the Walt Disney Company, because
that's true.
You've hardly heard anything about her. All you ever hear is Bob Chapek and Bob Iger. You never hear anything about the chairman.
That's very true. In fact, the only thing that we really heard about Susan Arnold was that she was very much supportive of Chapek until she wasn't, and
until McCarthy orchestrated that coup to oust him.
Right, and how Susan Arnold was a key figure in that story. But that's kind of the extent that we've actually heard of her. And we've also heard that she's not necessarily the biggest Iger fan either. So particularly interesting that it was Susan Arnold herself that called Iger to offer him the CEO position once again. That I thought was particularly fascinating because things had to be bad in order for her to have made that call.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100%. Oh my god. That's why I want to know more. I gotta know more. This is driving me nuts.
We're like on the edge here of unlocking something, and I don't know what it is, but something is definitely going on here. But we know that the entertainment industry at whole is going through kind of a tumultuous time, and really, I think that's why the evaluation process should be to kind of get insight into what these these potential CEO candidates would actually do, because rough times are ahead, and that's why I think Tom Staggs and Kevin Mayer are still kind of the top of the list for me, because they have been kind of in the upper echelon of Disney before. They kind of know how the Mouse House works. They Tom Staggs notably has been very well-rounded, not just working in the accountant space, but also in the Disney parks space. I think he can. I think he does have the chops in order to learn how to cultivate relationships with Hollywood, and I think he can position the company, along with Kevin Mayer, aside to pull through this kind of post-pandy streaming profit era right here, right? I think he can. I think he can do that pretty well, and that's really going to be the most important thing here. As economic conditions worsen, and as the advertising budgets for these major corporations who would usually utilize Disney's advertising platforms in order to advertise their products and services and whatever, as those kind of shrink
in some areas.
Yeah, I mean maybe. It's just the advertising potential is withering away. And how do you make streaming profitable? How do you turn Disney Plus, around from not just being a subscriber-driven business, but a profit-seeking business? That's going to take, I think, some key initiative and a vision in order to do that. Matthew, you had some ideas about how to turn around Disney Plus, didn't you?
Yeah. I was just saying they've got to find some way to pluck out content that might attract more viewers, or even alter the way it's paid for, or even just sell off some services that they might not need. Not a lot of major sell-offs, but like some minor sell-offs, like cut some of the Fox content out that they don't really need.
Right.
What I honestly think Disney should have done, and you may disagree with me on this, but when Iger initially bought out Fox, what he should have done is bought it out just to get Star Wars and then just sell it off again, if that's even possible. Or do you think Disney just had to acquire Fox as a whole?
Well, they could have acquired Fox as a whole and kept what they needed, like the X-Men, right, and the remaining Star Wars stuff, and maybe Nat Geo. I'm a firm believer, and I know a lot of Disney fans will probably hem and haw and roll their eyes at me for this, but I think Nat Geo is sort of like the modern day equivalent of Walt Disney's True Life Adventure series, right? Like it's very much like that edutainment kind of spirit and tradition that Walt started with the True Life series. I think Nat Geo, out of everything in the Fox portfolio, Nat Geo is the thing that feels the most Disney. Absolutely. I've been hooked on this Treasures of Egypt show on Disney Plus, Nat Geo, where they go into like these various tombs of like Cleopatra and Ramses and all these pharaohs of Egypt and stuff. It's fascinating stuff. I'm intrigued and drawn into it, just like I was when Walt would get up there and talk about, the wildlife and all that. It is very much in that Walt Disney spirit. But yes, Matthew, I think you make a great point. I think that they need to sell off some of the Fox stuff. Absolutely. Bring down that debt load quite a bit. Now, I do like Dre, you mentioned Staggs and Meyer, the guy right here with the hand in his jacket, and Meyer over there right behind Dana Walden with his arms folded. These guys right now, they run a company called Candle Media. Okay, it's valued, I think, at like $4 billion.
Yeah,
I think that's the move. If it was up to OG, and it's not obviously not up to OG, but if it's up to OG, I would say acquire Candle Media You know, maybe sell off some of the Fox stuff a little bit, kind of offload some stuff to kind of, you know, to kind of loosen up the funds, but acquire Candle Media and bring on Staggs and Meyer as like a CEO and co-CEO kind of role.
Yeah.
Disney has traditionally, over its 100-year history, has shown that kind of dynamic in leadership works really well. Like you said, Dre, Tom Staggs, he was proven to be a great CFO, but then he was also proved to be a great theme park head as well. He kind of did both roles fantastic. Kevin Meyer was really Bob Iger's right-hand man during all the bigger acquisitions, Marvel, Lucasfilm, Pixar, all of that. He has that chops. So I think these are your two guys right here. I think Staggs and Meyer are the guys. And we'll see. Look, we're all outsiders. We're kind of seeing it from the outside in. Maybe there's more to these gentlemen that are maybe not so good. I don't know.
Yeah.
But where I sit, I think these are the guys. I think this is the move you make. You acquire Candle Media and you bring these two guys in, and they become like a joint team to run this massive company. And Dre, to your credit, you've even said Disney is too big for one person right now. You kind of need a kind of a joint CEO kind of situation, or at least a CEO and president or something, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And that honestly begs the question, why did Iger get rid of those positions in the first place? You know, in 2012, he got rid of the president position. But why? Maybe it was just a massive power play.
I think it's a power play, Matthew. I think that he didn't want to feel like he has somebody breathing down his neck, perhaps. Look, Bob Iger, he did a lot of great things for the Walt Disney Company, but there were a lot of things too that really weren't that great. He was CEO and chairman of the board after 2012. That's a lot of power for one person to wield. And if you notice, Disney started to decline after 2012. Not immediately, because it takes time for this stuff, but that's when you started to see the wheels fall off a little bit, was after 2012 into like, you know, when like Last Jedi, you know, when the Star Wars stuff and that drama started to unfold. Shanghai Disneyland was around 2015, right? That's when the wheels started coming off the train a little bit. And it's no coincidence. It was Iger running the CEO. He was CEO and chairman of the board. It was too much power for one person. There was no check on his power. Go ahead, Dre. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and we've seen Iger kind of play around with these positions before. For example, when the Pandy really started to get going in kind of the spring of 2020. And you'll remember that he not only handed the CEO position off to Chapek, but he said, "Oh, I'm going to step aside and be part of the creative, part of the the creative teams surrounding the company, and put in my input there." Well, when things started to kick off and things started to get shut down, apparently he created this kind of executive chairman position for himself in order to give himself more power. So it is one of those things where Iger, when he feels that he has none or not enough, he'll take it, and he'll get it by hook or by crook. And I think that's what we saw over the kind of the latter 2 years of the Chapek experiment, right? Is him attempting to gain more power and to get back what he relinquished, and now he's back, and it's kind of quite interesting how that has all worked. You're right, OG. I have said before that I think this is a dual head role here. I don't think the Walt Disney Company, with all of their interests and all of the industries that they've invested themselves in all over the world, have kind of made this company a little bit unmanageable for one person. And I think you do have to have a dual person structure in order to kind of provide that otherwise impossible well-roundedness that like I said, is impossible to find for anybody being considered for that role. I just don't think it exists. Even as well-rounded as some of these succession or potential CEO candidates are, no, I don't think anybody is going to be well-rounded enough in order to get their hands around just how many industries are key to Disney's future success and their growth potential.
100%. Now, Dre, you have an article which kind of ties into all of this, and I think it'll be kind of. Go ahead and share it. We'll talk about this because this is very, very interesting. This is the future of not just Disney, but really the industry in general. I mean, this is a massive turning point for Hollywood right now. So I'll let you set the table, Dre, and we'll go from there.
Oh yes, no issues. Specifically, the near future, OG, and the near future is rough right now. This is via the Financial Times here. Media groups shed $500 billion in value as shares head for historic drop. Streaming services hit by rising costs, consumer belt tightening, and drops in advertising. And that last part is actually key. It's the one thing that here on OG55 we haven't talked much about, but it's absolutely part of the business as it exists with Disney. And we've actually gotten some feedback from some people that we've had conversations with. I know OG who are like, okay, the advertising potential that right there is the probably the biggest red flag in Disney's near future here. More than $500 billion has been wiped out off the market value of the world's biggest media companies this year as investors soured on the streaming revolution, triggering historic share price declines for broadcasting and entertainment groups. Intensifying competition and rising costs have combined with consumer belt tightening and an advertising slowdown to spark an industry-wide decline. Media, which for investors spans a broad range of activities from film production to advertising to cable television, has been among the hardest hit sectors in what is said to be the worst year for global equities since the financial crisis. Quote, "It's been a perfect storm of bad news," said Michael Nathanson, media analyst from MoffettNathanson. "I've been covering this sector for a long time, and I've never seen such a bad collection of data points before." Walt Disney shares, down about 45%, are heading for their biggest annual fall since at least 1974. The shares have come under more pressure in recent days as takings from Disney's eagerly anticipated Avatar sequel fell short of estimates in its opening weekend. We'll get back to that in a moment. Paramount Global has dropped 42% this year, and Netflix 52%, while Warner Bros. Discovery has tumbled 63% since its creation this year by the combination of Discovery and AT&T's Warner Media. The conglomerate's executives are trying to integrate two of the largest operations in media at a time of industry turmoil, and last week warned it faced as much as a $5.3 billion loss in restructuring other charges related to the merger.
Wow.
This is tough right here. And we'll go into this further, but it's not just Disney that has been hit by this. Now, they've been hit some of the worst, I think, of them all, but it's Paramount. It's Netflix. It's Warner Bros. Discovery that has taken some of the biggest hits here. It goes on to say here, let me just get this quote right here. The Dow Jones Media Titans Index, which tracks the performance of 30 of the world's biggest media companies, shed 40% this year, with its total market value declining from $1.35 trillion to $800 billion, according to the Financial Times report. This is big for the entire industry, and when you're having to make cuts in certain sectors, as we've heard so much about, when you're having to downsize as much as they are, you're also reducing your reach, which is what advertisers are going to be looking for. So that also kind of plays into this as well. What this Financial Times article actually airs out here is that because of the economic decline and because of people kind of pulling back on in terms of their consumer spending and some of their consumer sentiment regarding the economy, less people are inclined to actually buy what advertisers are selling. And so these companies who offer these products and services are cutting their advertising budgets, cutting their advertising departments, and that's less from which to pull from if you're Disney looking for advertisers to advertise on your platform. And with competition increasing, well, that's also watering down who can go to you to spend their advertising dollars on. So it's all kind of connected here in this horrible circle of life that we're going to be experiencing probably for the next couple of years.
What do you think, Matthew?
I think it is rather dire, to be honest, and I think any CEO is going to have to tighten the belt. Like, it doesn't matter if Disney selects Tom Staggs or Kevin Mayer; even they are going to have to do some things that fans will find unpopular.
Yeah. And I do find it interesting too in this article is that the whole article is sort of talking about like the streaming stuff as kind of being one of the main catalysts for these losses. But then they cite Avatar, the theatrical release, as the drag on the stock. I'm like, I found that a little bit ironic. But like, but overall the article is right though. I mean, the studio really, well, all studios really went way too all in on streaming. Like streaming is the future, and I stand by that. It absolutely is the future. But this kind of arms race to like get subscribers and get that number up to at any means necessary, I think was the wrong call. And I made the analogy many times here on the channel where it's like even like with YouTube, if you have 2 million subscribers, but every video you release only gets like 59 views. Well, like what good is having 2 million subscribers if the video, your content is not getting any traction, right? So these studios need to find a balance really. And like, okay, you want to bring in new people, but at the same time, that can't be your only focus. They got to get profitable. I think Disney should bring back Premier Access in some form or fashion. I'm not saying you got to do day and date, but they should bring some version of that back. That was a revenue stream for them. Bring it back, Disney. You know, that was something that you were getting like $30 a pop for these movies. You know, utilize that somehow, some way. The ad tier, I think, is going to help Disney Plus quite a bit. Do we know, is Hulu getting the ad tier too, Dre? Do we know if that's a thing, or is it just Disney Plus?
I believe it already has had an ad tier, and
okay.
So I believe it's Disney Plus following Hulu, but yes, I do believe ads will be incorporated in both products.
Yeah, so I think that'll help. And I think there's just going to be a general kind of like rearranging, reorganizing, restructuring of this whole model, streaming model, and how it kind of like interacts with the theatrical. I think that's one of the big things that we're going to hear from Bob Iger maybe in January is a restructuring thing on how all that connects and how it's kind of geared towards being more profitable. I think we're going to see some answers from Iger in January in regards to that. So interesting time for the industry. You know, Hollywood right now is kind of going through what the music industry went through in the early 2000s with like Napster and iTunes, right? And the music industry eventually bounced back, but Hollywood now is going to have to kind of make those tough decisions. And it's not going to be easy. There's going to be probably a few years of this where there's a lot of growing pains, you know?
Well, what worries me is I think the problems with theatrical can be overcome slowly because I think the theatrical product is something very, very unique. But the thing that concerns me, at least right now, especially after reading this article, is... Well, the article goes into this, and perhaps if I find it, I'll go ahead and read what it has to say about this. But when companies went all in on streaming, that furthered the cord cutting, which made which accelerated the losses incurred on the linear television side, right? But they all kind of went in on an industry that wasn't profitable yet. So you've kind of you've taken from Paul to what's the
like
what's
Feed Peter or something? I don't know.
Yeah, right. So
I'm not sure, but it's something like that.
It's something like that, but it's. And look, that wouldn't be necessarily a bad thing here, but you've really kind of cannibalized your successful business in order to make your non-successful business profitable. It's that is something to be concerned about because there's no going back, I think, the other way.
No,
whereas in theatrical, I think you could go back, right? Or you could provide some balance. Maybe not where it was before, but get back to a point where theatrical releases and streaming releases live harmoniously. That, I think, is a much more unlikely thing with linear television, which for Disney has been an extremely profitable portion of their business. Goes on to say, but while executives spent billions of dollars on streaming content, viewing options have proliferated, while living costs have soared, encouraging financially squeezed households to, quote, churn or switch between subscriptions. And this is a chart going over these cable companies and these streaming services that have been hardest hit. You see Roku, Atlas, Spotify, Warner Brothers Cable One, Dish, Liberty Broadband, Charter Communications, all of that, and then you have Walt Disney Company there, right at the lower half there. Rising interest rates have dented valuations, particularly of the sector's jam tomorrow, quote, growth stocks. Music provider Spotify has slumped 69%, and video specialist Roku, 81%. Traditional broadcasters have been hit too. Some of the steepest share price declines have been for owners of U.S. cable assets. Long been a cash cow. Charter Communications is down 53%, and Comcast 31%. So-called cord cutting has accelerated in the U.S., with the number of subscriptions to traditional pay TV tracked by Macquarie falling 8.3% in the third quarter compared with the same period a year earlier. Rising prices, especially for sport, had until recently mitigated the drop in consumers. Quote, but getting into a recession, you worry that the customer will refuse to pay, said Tim Nolan, media tech analyst at Macquarie. That's kind of the issue, right? This all in on streaming has really furthered this cord cutting and has really eaten into revenue potential. Most streaming services were incurring, quote, very heavy losses, so media companies, quote, aren't yet in a position where they can offset the linear decline. As Nolan added, yeah, that's exactly what we've been saying right here. How do you offset those losses in a place like streaming where it hasn't been profitable yet? And so that's why the rush to get streaming profitable is a very real issue.
No, it's a huge issue, and I think what you do is, and it might be kind of late in the game, but I think eventually it'll work out. I think what you do is you do the ad tiers. You can't have it where there's no ads. I think you kind of streaming will kind of become the new television, the new linear, so to speak. Once they get the ad tiers up and running, all these platforms, I think it'll be sort of the new linear. But that's not going to happen overnight. And it's going to be a rough journey in the meantime. So
and that's the other thing too. You know, when you had cable television, you were able to bundle all of these different channels onto people's television sets. You know, we very well know, OG, that all of these companies, not everybody's going to pay for all of them.
No,
and I think it's inevitable that they dwindle down here, but I wonder if there could be a play for some of these companies to group up.
I was just
and
thinking
bundle
about that.
Together between
That's
each other.
funny. That's funny. That's crazy. I was just thinking the same thing. Like maybe Iger and Zaslav. Hey, let's work something out, Zazzy. Right? Let's do like the Disney Warner bundle. So you get D+, Hulu, ESPN for now, and and HBO Max all in some group. Now I think it's much more unlikely that Disney works with Comcast. There's a lot of bad blood there, and there has been for years.
The worst thing Disney can do, however, is just get out of streaming outright. It was inevitable sometime way down the line, but it would have to get into streaming.
Yes, yeah.
Oh no. They have such a financial stake in it right now, and they have a very valuable subscriber base in which a deal between associated companies could be very attractive. George is not here, so I'll make the crass jokes. You could call it the Disney Discovery deal, the double Ds, and sell it that way.
Yes, folks, we only have high-class stuff on this show.
Do you have the bargain drop, by the way?
Oh, I do. For the double Ds, absolutely. You go ahead and get that for you.
And there's the biggest bargain of all.
There you go. There you go. That's perfect. Oh, we really... we provide the viewers the content that they didn't even know they wanted. So proud of that. But yes, just to get back to it a little bit. Yeah, I think there might be a potential for that going forward. And maybe not with big companies like initially, but hey, maybe smaller companies, maybe your Paramounts, right, or your Peacocks or whatever, your smaller streaming services that by themselves might not be as interesting to the consumer that they as much as they would be anyway if they were packaged together. Matthew, do you think that might offset some of this stuff when it comes to
It
the
might
smaller
offset
streamers?
some of the losses.
Okay. And I know, Matthew, we talked about last time about the UK and how, energy, I think, is a big concern here. Do you see kind of the UK's or the kind of the European energy crisis furthering this, and where people are kind of like, they're a little bit more choosy with the products and services that they choose simply because they have to factor in some of those costs related to energy?
Yeah, probably will, and the strikes also aren't helping. But the less said about that, the better.
Yeah. It's this is tough. Other big losers include Paramount Global, whose stock has dropped more than 40%, Warner Brothers Discovery, the parent company of CNN, whose stock has tumbled more than 60%. Netflix experienced unprecedented 2 consecutive quarters of subscriber losses this year, which resulted in layoffs and cost cutting across the board. For the year, the stock is down 50%. This is hurting the entire media industry. In totality. I mean, this is not just a Disney isolated thing. However, Disney seems to be hit particularly hard amongst these streaming and media entertainment giants.
Absolutely. Now, I wanted to ask you guys. It's definitely related to this. This is actually from our friend Hedge. Dre know who Hedge is. Matthew, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Hedge.
I've seen him a number of times. Is he some kind of financial analysis?
Right. Yeah, he's a friend of the channel. He's a cool guy. He knows his Wall Street for sure. I'm going to share you a tweet from him because I do think this has something to do with some of it, not the whole picture, but why Disney may be getting a little harder than some of these other companies. The original tweet here was from Variety. It says Avatar: The Way of Water has generated $855 million globally, making it the 5th highest grossing movie of 2022 after just 10 days in theaters. Okay.
Yes.
This thing is a beast. I mean, it really is.
I believe it's eclipsed Wakanda Forever. It's an entire global run in the matter of just a couple of days. That's remarkable.
It's remarkable. So Hedge here says Avatar pushing the $1 billion mark. Remember CNBC's latest all-day hit piece on the movie last Monday that helped fuel a 5% rate on the stock? Once again, we see, and DF in Hedge speak means dark forces, okay? Once again, we see dark forces causing damage on fake news that is disproven days later. This has gone on for 18 months. Now, this is interesting because I do think this is an element of this whole equation. You see a lot... There is definitely a interest out there amongst content creators and even like the big mainstream firms like Variety and Hollywood Reporter, the big trades, right? To kind of like the king has fallen, right? Disney's top dog. Oh man, they're taking hits. It's always sexy when the top dog is taking the hits, right? So there's a little bit of a clickbait element here, and CNBC has kind of jumped on that and they've realized that. Do you guys think that this is a big problem for Disney? Because, you get that narrative out there for this stuff, and it's sort of like the
red meat.
It's the red meat and sort of the, what's that
It's
word?
all too popular.
Right. It's all too popular, and it's sort of like the self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Where it's like you put it out there that Disney's failing, and then people see this and go, oh man, I don't want to watch that movie. It sounds like everyone doesn't like it. It's failing. They don't see it. Like, it's this sort of perpetual thing. Is this a problem, Matthew? Or is this kind of like
potentially?
Yeah.
And I honestly think some Disney fans have just become so disillusioned now with the company that they actually don't care who's CEO anymore. They just want Disney to just go out of business because they don't think anyone in this world is fit to run the company.
Oh, yeah, I mean that's definitely out there amongst a subset. I don't know how widespread that thought is, but it is out there, Matthew. I think you're correct. You do have people who are rooting for Disney to fail because they've meddled in a franchise that they hold dear to their heart, or it's eaten up an industry in which they had fondness for, or whatever the grievance is. This is revenge time for them. So
they want the whole world to just go cold turkey on Disney.
See, I don't
sometimes you
understand
just want to
that.
see the whole world burn. You know, that kind of thing, right?
I don't understand that because you're taking decisions from modern management, and you want to destroy a company with 100-year legacy, something that this incredible man Walt Disney built. You want to just completely destroy that and burn it to the ground because you didn't like what Chapek said or did, or you don't like what Iger did. I find that a little childish, in my opinion.
And nobody said it was rational, you know, and revenge never is, right. It's always very emotionally driven, and so you do have people that are emotionally driven this way. I mean, there are some people who believe that because Disney wasn't a powerhouse, let's say, in the entertainment world in the 70s and 80s, it's why we have some of the 80s kind of IPs or so forth that were allowed to thrive because Disney wasn't part of the equation. Some people actually do believe this.
And that's true, actually, to some degree. That is true. Transformers, Care Bears, He-Man, all that stuff was able to kind of come up because, and those were that's like the staple of the 80s. I mean, when I was a kid in the 80s, I was more into that stuff than I was anything Disney, to be honest, you know? Yeah,
and I will argue that I'll agree in that competition's good. You know, it's good for the industry, it's good for the consumer, and so forth. But you know, at the same time, you know, some people feel that Disney has been very what is it, anti-competitive in its practices, and to an extent, maybe. Right? Yeah. They've bought up a lot of things recently, and that's kind of rubbed people the wrong way. So I think that's where a lot of this enthusiasm for Disney to fail is actually coming from. I will say, look, look, even if you weren't a big Disney fan, right? The idea that Disney is going to fail here spectacularly, right? I think it's a little bit it's fantasy, because what would most likely happen is even if they do crater, they'll be picked up by another company, and all of those assets now become part of them. So I always argue, even if you aren't a Disney fan, at least, you know, we should triumph or champion the people or the thought processy that gets us better films and better product, because it's going to be in the hands of somebody. It might as well be in the hands of the devil we know versus devil we don't, right? Well, that kind of thing.
You bring up a great point, Trey, right? And like, who is big enough to swallow up Disney? Let's just say Disney creators. Who's big enough to really even swallow this company up? Probably one of the only names out there would be Apple. Well, if you're concerned about politics in Disney content being too woke or whatever, well, you want Apple to buy Disney? You think Tim Cook is going to get the politics out of Disney content? There's no way. This guy is so woke, it's incredible. So you're like you said, Dre, you're exchanging one for the other at that point. Yeah. You know, you're not making any ground. You're just, okay, so now we're not going to have woke Iger. We'll have woke Tim Cook. Okay. Right. Way to go.
Exactly. Or, you know, I mean, hey, if you're not okay with, what is it, woke Bob Iger, right? There's a possibility that they not only just be eaten up by Apple, they could be eaten up by Amazon. And I think a lot of the people, you know, watching these culture wars as they play out, you know, that's I think you know, anybody would agree that is far less of an enviable prospect than the alternative.
Right.
So you have to be kind of, you know, be careful what you wish for, guys. Right. I mean, that's the most important thing here. To Hedges' point, however, it's really strange, because there was obviously a media narrative going around looking to trash and bring down Chapek. I think that's very, very clear. And
absolutely,
we've speculated on who might have been behind that and so forth. And I think we kind of assumed that once Chapek was gone, some of this would wither away. But as we learned with a certain president, right? You're going to miss me when I'm gone, okay? I'm just going to put it out there. You're going to miss me. And sure enough, I think they missed Chapek to some degree, and now they're trying to kind of continue that narrative even without Chapek, and they're continuing the attacks, and they're continuing the kind of lambasting and so forth, because, you know, to an extent, Matthew, as you said before, it gets the clicks, right? It gets the eyeballs, it gets the, you know, the attention certainly from people who are looking for Disney to fail. And I think that's I'll offer the same opinion that I did to that subset of fandom who do want Disney to fail, to these journalists. Be careful what you wish for sure.
Well, no, 100%, 100%. It's like, you don't like you said, Dre. The devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. You don't know who's going to snatch Disney up, right? For example, the trades we're all wishing and praying that Chapek would leave and Iger would come back. I remember all those hit pieces on Chapek, how wonderful the Bob Iger years were, and why can't we just go back to the Bob Iger years? Well, Iger's back, and y'all still ain't happy. We just saw a hit piece from Deadline the other day about how every problem in the Walt Disney Company was really sown by Iger, and they're not wrong. They're not wrong. But where was Deadline 2 years ago or a year and a half ago with this? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, it's ridiculous. And we just talked about how the entire media industry is going through these very tumultuous growing pains, right?
Yeah.
And how they're transitioning from these bread and butter platforms like linear and theatrical distribution to streaming and so forth, and how that's kind of generated a lot of it's agitated a lot of things as it's making its transitionary changes. But they want to put all that on Chapek in terms of Disney's own foibles with that whole thing, and it's like, wait a minute, this is not Chapek's doing. This is not all because of Chapek. This is an industry-wide thing. Obviously, Disney played in the hand, it, just like a lot of other places did. But certainly, even as it relates to Disney, a lot of that was Iger's doing and so forth, and how these articles become far more nuanced now that Iger is back in. It's very, very interesting, and the timing is a particular interest, like you said, OG. I also wanted to go into, because Hedge, I think he's talking about Avatar. I think it's important to kind of go over this kind of Avatar.
Let's do it.
This comes at us from Variety. It says here, so far, James Cameron's long-delayed sequel has generated $253.7 million at the domestic box office and around $600 million internationally. Even with harsh winter in North America and rising cases of COVID, RSV, and the flu across the world, the Avatar sequel is expected to bring in strong grosses in the coming days. By the end of the year, the 350 million budgeted tentpole, which, by the way, I think that's a little bit under, but we'll get into that as well, is aiming to hit the $1 billion mark. It's a benchmark that only two other movies, Top Gun Maverick and Jurassic World Dominion, have managed to hit in 2022. And then it goes on to go over some of its international successes in Korea, France, Germany. But outside of North America, Avatar 2 has enjoyed the strongest turnout in China with 100.5 million. And there's reasons for which some of these things have even been like better than expected or worse than expected. For one, the worldwide box office hasn't fully rebounded from the pandemic, and important markets like China are experiencing a resurgence of the virus, aka some people, let's say, are let's say they're being barred from conducting normal life within the country. That's all I'll say. Moreover, the sequel won't be playing in Russia, where the original grossed $116 million. Now that's
made that much in Russia?
I didn't know that.
Holy crap! That's
I did not know that. I mean, now Christine Wastelands McCarthy, I heard her in a quarterly earnings call talk about the Russia thing and say, they're just 2% of our business. That seems like a pretty consequential 2%, if you ask me.
Yeah, at least with Avatar, they seem to come in droves for that film. I mean, that's a big number.
It's an international movie, and when you cut yourself off from some of these international markets, that's actually going to happen. Now, I don't mean to sympathize with any particular country or whatever. I'm just saying, when you're looking at it from a business perspective, you have to take these things into account.
Absolutely.
Credit to Variety for actually doing that, and might give some insight into why this isn't playing quite as well. It's also interesting, too, when you look at, grossing $160 million in Russia like that. I mean, imagine what that could have been this year. Because that was a figure 13 years ago. Obviously, inflation and the economy have changed.
It'd be like 200 million.
possibly.
Around,
I don't know.
you know?
I don't know what the inflation rate is in Russia, but you have to also consider, you know, what it would have been like in some of these other countries and
Right.
so forth. Something is definitely occurring because, you know, I mean, even in North America, right? I mean, ticket prices have gone up double than of that era back in 2009 when the original came out, and a lot of these figures that we're getting from day to day are indicative of some of the numbers that we saw before, and I'm surprised by that because you would have think they would have been a much higher, considering the inflationary issues that we're experiencing even recently. You know, 2 years recently, right? If your figures are the same but your inflation is much different, that means that less people are actually seeing this movie.
Right, 100%. And our friend WDW Pro made a great tweet I think it was yesterday, about let me go ahead and bring it up because
Sure.
I think he made a great point here. And
Yeah,
I think a lot of people are missing this.
And I'll set it up a little bit. It's important to understand that the conditions that that benefited the original Avatar back in 2009, right? They're a little bit different than today. Back in 2009, I believe Christmas Day fell on a Saturday, which historically has been extremely successful for box office productions, including Avatar. Whereas in 2022, it fell on a Sunday, which, you know, historically, Sunday's not been a good barn burner, and Christmas Eve, that's been particularly hurtful to the theatrical box office. Well, we saw this year that it fell on a Saturday. So your biggest day of potential revenue generation in terms of that second weekend, it just didn't line up in the same way that it did the original Avatar. Also, too, I think a big thing here, and I think this is what WDW Pro is going to bring out here, is you got a huge storm affecting essentially all of the Eastern Seaboard and much of the West here. I think the two states that aren't actually affected by this are like portions of California and Arizona. I mean, it's affecting all kinds of regions here in North America. A lot of people without power. I know our boy Disney Fan Man 23 suffered from those kind of things, and so it's important to include that in your analysis when you're looking at first weekend to second.
Absolutely, and this is actually while we were talking, he actually tweeted this, which is actually relevant to our conversation. I'll read this tweet first, and then I'll get to the one I originally wanted to bring up.
Please.
But Pro here says the fall off of films not named Avatar is likely related to how many Avatar 2 reservations were made weeks in advance. That's a great point, Pro. This is very much an event film where people are planning weeks or days and weeks in advance to get the best theater. So she's absolutely right on that.
They call it like reservation-oriented viewing or something, right?
Exactly.
Scheduled viewing. Yeah.
Scheduled viewing, exactly. He goes on to say people didn't necessarily want to brave Arctic temps to see Puss in Boots, but they didn't want to lose Avatar reservation money either. Yeah. No, he's spot on with this. He's absolutely spot on with this. And then he the tweet I really wanted to bring up though, and I think he makes a great point here. And Pro usually does. Pro is a brilliant guy. We like Pro.
Oh, yes.
He says here, given the weather in North America this weekend, no judgments on any movie's popularity should be made based on the box office. People don't want to go to theaters in dangerously cold weather. And he's right. Avatar did come out a little softer than they expected. I think it made like 50 something million for the traditional weekend, the Friday through Sunday. And I think it's up to like 80 something million for the longer weekend, including today. Now that's very good for a regular movie. That's very, very good. But for Avatar, it's coming a little softer. But
yeah,
like Pro says, we have to understand the situation on the ground. There is context to this stuff, and like you said, Dre, Christmas falls on the Sunday. The weather in the Northeast has been absolutely atrocious. No one's going out in that, you know?
No, but and a lot of people are actually encouraged to stay home, stay off the roads and so forth. So that also eats into your box office potential there. I found it kind of funny that a lot of these trades and so forth would point to weather as one of the reasons why DCA didn't open to big attendance numbers and all that. In this case, though, it actually does make a huge difference.
Oh, yeah.
So we shouldn't underestimate it at all. I remember talking to you, OG, and suggesting that, hey, if this second weekend, if we see like a 40 to 50% drop, we're still good, right?
We're good.
40% drop, cooking with gas, right? 30%, it's awesome. 60%, we're done for. I think it came in at like 58%. It was like right there.
So we're good.
but we're still we're still good though. We're still good, right? Because obviously you have to take into account the offset that would happen because of the Christmas holiday and the weather, of course. And I think it is very appointment driven, reservation driven. And so I think people are still they're still going out there. I think this still has legs, but if we're and I think it will hit the 1.4, 1.5 billion dollar box office earning potential, right? I think it will hit those numbers. Does it have 2 billion? I don't think so, but maybe it doesn't need to make all that much.
Yeah, 100%. Matthew, your thoughts on Avatar box office second weekend?
Honestly, done the best I thought it could. It was, of course, I had a feeling it was going to be rocky. It didn't matter whether it was from Disney or Universal or Warner Brothers, whichever distributor it was from, it was going to struggle.
Right. No, you're right. And it did the best it could. I mean, it still came in pretty solid, but I'm actually quite surprised it's pulling what it's pulling, to be honest with you, considering all factors involved. Yeah, it's doing pretty good. But this weekend this upcoming week will give us a better picture. I'm assuming, and we'll keep in touch with Family Man and kind of see what's going on out there with the weather. I'm assuming though it's going to improve this week, and the people in his area and around that Northeast that were impacted by the storm are going to start going out again, and maybe we'll get a rebound tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, right? So we'll see. And
I also think too, this film was definitely front loaded in terms of its production costs. I think. I mean, the article makes reference to like a $350 million figure. I think it's closer to 460, right? Because of so much R&D and James Cameron, he can't seem to make a cheap film. But also too, I think this is a very CG heavy film in which it requires a lot of rendering power to actually facilitate. So there's gonna be some costs. Ain't no question about that. But I will say though, I mean, if you hit that 1.4, 1.5 billion dollar figure, I think you're going to be okay in terms of the financials. I think so. I think Disney will have been satisfied with that, and I think these films will actually get cheaper as time goes on. Now they're kind of you could slow down the R&D just a little bit. And so, and I've not seen debate for the Avatar franchise. I think a lot of people are coming out of this film going, hey, you know what? That was pretty good. I'm looking forward to the next one, which was interesting. It's not something that I originally anticipated. And that's good if you want to set this up for future, franchise entries as we go along here. So let's just see. It's still very, very early. There's a lot of box office gross left to be had out there. I do agree with VR's assessment, though, Valiant Renegade's assessment, that this is not going to be shoved on to Disney Plus after 30 days.
Oh, you know what? And Valiant made a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, Dre. Valiant made a great point, and we'll get to the article in just a moment.
No, don't worry about it. It's good.
But Valiant, I watched his video on Avatar. Yeah, and he made a really good point that the Fox acquisition was kind of done after Cameron made his deal with Fox, right?
Yeah, and inherited some of those contractual obligations.
Exactly. So this is, I agree with VR. This isn't going to get dropped onto Disney Plus out the gate. Like this is going to be, it's probably going to go through the motions like it would have if if Disney didn't own it, right? So you might see the streaming rights go to Amazon Prime or Netflix or something first, and then it goes through the litany of all the different contracts that they had in place already, and then it'll finally, when those are all done and over, then it'll land on Disney Plus. It's not going to land on Disney Plus right out the gate, and that might be actually to Disney's benefit because they're going to make more money than that through that means, right? And VR's kind of made that argument for a while now, where this kind of like path where you hit theaters and then you license it out to this party, you license it out to that party, then right, you kind of double and triple dip. Yeah. So it might work out for them better financially anyway, I think, and they're going to stick with it. I think. Yeah.
It's too big of a movie not to, you know. I mean, it's you're not gonna Strange World this. I think you're gonna ride this out here. Even if you don't give it out to third party licensees, you hold it back for Disney Plus up until you need to drop it, right? And in order to maximize your revenue potential from other ancillary means. So I think that also I think will bear a lot of fruit for Disney. We're just going to have to see what actually happens with that. But I wanted to go ahead and bring up this article here. I meant to bring this up in the live show, just didn't have time. We just get, the news comes fast and furious, and everybody has their questions, and which we love. But sometimes it prevents us from getting to some of these stories here, and some of the stories that don't necessarily have, that aren't getting a lot of play. In our circles, right? I want to go ahead and bring this up. Wells Fargo economists say housing downturn is still in early innings. And this one right here directly relates to it. This comes from Liz Ann Saunders. November's 11.2% drop in building permits was worst since April 2020 and among the worst in the past 2 decades. And you can see that right here as it's graphed right here. I mean, it was particularly bad. And so what this Wells Fargo economist is actually talking about, they actually do bring that up, saying, quote here, the housing correction still appears to be in the early innings. The ongoing contraction in buyer demand means further price drops are on the horizon. The recent downfall in single-family building permits points to a sharp pullback in new construction in the near term. The Wells Fargo economists said they're projecting total housing starts to reach 1.56 million in 2022 and fall to 1.32 million in 2023. What does all this mean, right? Why am I bringing this up? Well, we just talked about the theatrical side of Disney's business. We talked about the advertising side of Disney's business. I think this right here speaks to the parks, right? Because a lot of people, what they will do is they'll take the capital out of or equity out of their homes, right? Maybe remortgage, refinance, whatever, and use it as disposable income or to pay out basic needs and services and so forth, right? Well, if your capital or equity is tied up in your house, and now that house is worth a lot less than it was before, that becomes an issue, right? That reduces discretionary spending potential. If in fact you're using that, which I think a lot of people do when they budget out, multi-$1,000 vacation packages to any of these destination resorts, like Walt Disney World, Universal Studios Florida, Disneyland Resort potentially, etc. Right? And you have a lack of building permits. So think about the amount of industries that are affected just from that. Think about how much labor is tied up in that. Think about the workers that get paid from providing certain supplies and facilitating logistics and so forth. Think about what happens with all of that potential revenue potential when that dries up. I think we're starting to see indications here that the economy is slowing down, and that might hurt not just Disney's advertising potential or theatrical potential, but I think the parks might be hit hard on this as Disney has kind of pivoted towards let's say a more expensive quality premium product.
What are your thoughts on this, Matthew?
I honestly think it is kind of inevitable that everywhere is going to see a decline.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
there is no escape.
You're right. There's no escape, and these companies are going to have to sort of be a little proactive and get kind of ahead of the curve here, and try to as best they can set themselves up to mitigate these losses. Wastelands McCarthy has said a few times now on quarterly earnings that she wants to pull those levers, right? So when demand kind of wanes, they can bring in the key holders and what have you. So we might see more of that. We might see more Magic key holders, maybe in the coming months. I know again, Pro was saying that I guess I guess January and February is looking kind of soft for Disneyland and Disney World. I'm not sure what he's basing that off of. I'm assuming the reservation calendar is what, or maybe he's got internal numbers. I don't know, but
he might have internal numbers. I mean, we all kind of speculated, why are they like, why usually when it comes to these grand anniversary celebrations, they break out in like late spring, early summer, right? Why is this one being pegged for, January of 2020? That 2023, that seemed a little bit odd, at least to me. Maybe one of the reasons was maybe their forecasting showed, oh, this is going to be a little bit soft. Let's pump up the numbers by actually having the Disney 100 start right at the beginning of the year rather than towards the middle. And maybe there is some wisdom and value in that. And maybe this is one of the reasons why.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, you kind of mitigate those losses by putting something really big in that spot. So you got, if you're at Disneyland, you're going to have the Disney 100 and all of the offerings, the new fireworks, new World of Color, all that good stuff, on top of Mickey Minnie Runaway Railway.
Yeah,
that's going to bring a lot of new people in, and a lot of new people coming in at a time when it's traditionally kind of slow at the resort. January, February, March. I mean, that's not the super busiest time. So, and especially right now with the economy and everything kind of going to hell in a handbasket, that might be the best move to do it. And this is really why too, there's been a lot of talk about Tron and sort of like, well, it's done. And we saw it on the parade on Christmas. Why can't we just open it? Well, this is why, Disney is going to utilize their chess pieces in the smartest way possible. I know for me as a content creator, if I take a Saturday and just film like 3 or 4 videos, I'm not just going to upload all 3 videos at once because they're all done. You have to be a little smart in how you release this stuff, or you cannibalize your own work and you hurt your own work. Disney just gave Florida a brand new e-ticket, a brand new attraction, Cosmic Rewind. It just opened in like October. It would be foolish for them to like 2 months later open Tron now. You're cannibalizing the gains from Cosmic Rewind. Give it a little breathing room, So yeah, it's interesting. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah. Oh yes. It's a fascinating how they kind of parse those things out and where they position this stuff. A lot of people have said, oh, why can't Tron open now? Clearly it's ready to be open. Well, first of all, if you looked at that GMA footage, it looked like some things were not ready for their public debut. They still have a little bit of tidying up to do. That's first off. But second off, yes, I mean, look, we see it in theatrical all the time, right? When things are in the can, things will be ready. They could be shown tomorrow if they wanted to, but they position them out. They space them out because there are certain windows in which these things are most profitable within, right? Whether it be competitive factors, major holidays, the consumer, the domestic consumer or international consumer patterns regarding work and so forth. Like there are advantageous times in which to release this stuff, and Disney's not going to take I'm sure $200, $300 million investment, something like that, in the form of Tron and debut it early just because a couple of fans whine and complain about it. No, they're going to release these at strategic times, and that strategy, it does have an effect. I remember from our what are we calling him again? Trust me, bro.
Yeah. Dude, trust me, bro.
Right.
Our source,
our contact within the company, right? Who's been working there for a long, long time. They were suggesting to us that, hey, look, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge opening in the summer. Hey, I could have told you that it wasn't going to open because of some of the data regarding previous additions to the Disneyland Resort and how successful they have or have not been. For example, the person used the example of Indiana Jones Adventure and how it opened in, I believe, March of 1995, and how that positioned the resort nicely for a big summer, kind of profitable summer. That as a result of Indiana Jones actually opening at that time than it otherwise would have if it was open in the summer. And so Star Wars Galaxy's Edge opens in the summer. They cleared all the pass holders, right, from actually attending that. And, well, they didn't quite get the the demand that they maybe necessarily expected. Obviously, too, I think Rise of Resistance has a lot to do with that, as we've said before on this show. But it just goes to show you that, like, there are times when you're going to, maximize or saturate the earning potential via vacation packages, hotel stays, ticket purchases, and so forth. That otherwise you wouldn't. So that's kind of what's going on there a little bit. I just think it's kind of fascinating how people kind of argue and so forth there. But moreover, we've seen a deluge of Disneyland resort commercials out in my area. Have you seen this, OG? I've seen a lot of these. Even Scott Gustin, he had on Twitter talking about one of them, and the long tagline of things at the end of the commercial, and how the I like to call that tagline the verbal fine print is what I like to call that. The verbal fine print. It was like blah, 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 in 2023. Blah, 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 blah. Let's see if I can bring it up here. It was so bad, and it's a shame because actually I was saying it on Twitter too. Like, the shot of the castle was actually really cool how they shot it. Oh yeah. They kind of like I don't know, like sped up the people going through the people around the castle, and they kind of pivoted around the castle in just a really unique kind of cool way, and they destroy all of that coolness with this ending. I don't know if we can play it with the audio. I think we can. You think we can? Yeah, I don't think it'll get us. Again, this is recorded from a TV. There's a little bit of that going on there. Yeah. If there's no audio in this segment when OG puts this up, you'll know why. But it's on Scott Gustin's page. If you go on his Twitter account, you can find it real easily. If people want to follow along, if we can't hear, but we'll try. OG, how about that? We'll try. Let's do it. Come on. Oh, no sound. Yep, no sound. Sorry, guys. Do apologize. Here we go. There we go.
Welcome to your happiest place on earth, only at the Disneyland Resort. Make every visit your happiest at the Disneyland Resort for as low as $104 per person on select weekdays with a one-day, one-park-a-day Tier 0 ticket from January 9th through February 8th, 2023.
Wow, that makes it real easy, huh?
That's crazy. That's crazy. Go ahead and mute it, Dre, and play that first section real quick again. I see. I love how that shot of the castle is dope. How the people are going through it. That looks really cool, and they ruin it with the verbal diarrhea at the end. Hate it.
And they have to, OG, because it's been so freaking complicated now in order to visit the Disneyland Resort. I mean, you heard the verbal diarrhea at the end there. It goes into, you have to have a tier 0 ticket between this and this time because there's only so many of those, right? $104 a day for a one-day, one park, and it's just. It's a complicated thing. I know I was having a conversation with a good friend who wanted to visit the Zen Resort for the very first time, and I'm like, okay, are you good at note-taking? I mean, how do you describe some of this stuff? It's really, really hard, and it's interesting how the company itself has had to struggle with this.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, you can narrow it down to just you buy a ticket and then you go online and make a reservation for the day you want to go. I mean, but if you're really going to get into it with someone in terms of the detail, the different price tiers and what have you, it can get really, really complicated, yeah, because you're talking like, on Monday it's this price, on Wednesday it's that price, and and that's why I'm glad I got the pass, and I just it's done. The tickets have become really, really just too much. I don't even know. Honestly, I don't even know how much. I don't really even know the tiers at this point. I haven't really been following it. I mean, from tier to tier, is it like that much of a difference for these tickets, or is it?
Oh, from tier 0 to tier 6, you could be paying double. I think. I mean,
really?
Oh yeah.
Oh my god,
it's a lot. But that's kind of part of the thing now with this variable pricing, and they've added a lot more nuance to this, and they have their way of maximizing profit potential for all these days and maximizing demand and so forth. But it's created a system that is very kind of difficult to navigate for the average consumer. And so I think that's why Universal is kind of going the route of like, hey, we're not going to complicate it all. In order to have what they view as a market advantage over Disney in that regard. It's a very interesting proposition, Matthew. Now, do you frequent Disneyland Paris at all?
No, not that frequently. No.
Oh, really? Okay.
The last time we actually went was in 2010, and I was only like 9 years old at the time, and we felt it had actually lost some of its magic.
That's really unfortunate. Do you consider any of the Disney resorts right now a home park at all? Do you visit any of them frequently?
No, not really. It really is once in a lifetime thing,
Okay.
as far as my family's concerned.
Well, okay, well, I'll phrase it like this. If it was between, I mean, let's say you weren't quite as big of a Disney fan as you are right now, right? And you're determining whether or not to go to Universal Studios Florida or Walt Disney World for your 2-week holiday.
I'd probably still consider Disney even under those circumstances.
Oh, really? Okay, because the product is there.
Yeah, I would rather than going to Universal multiple times, I would rather just take something a bit leaner, even if it means doing it less frequently.
That's interesting.
That's interesting.
Now we'll also see the Epic Universe thing is still kind of a up in the air thing. We've talked to Wizard a few times about this.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to take off now.
Oh, Matthew. Okay, well, we'll go ahead, Matthew, and let everybody. Actually, I was going to play you a Daddy Josh drop before we go, Matthew.
Yes, please. Before we go, please.
I'm going to go ahead and play you a Daddy Josh drop because we know how he hardworking Daddy Josh.
Yeah, I just stare at my desk, but it looks like I'm working. I do that for probably another hour after lunch, too. I'd say in a given week, I probably only do about 15 minutes of real, actual work.
But a picture with fans in Avengers Campus, so, right?
Perfect.
Right. But Matthew, it's been an actual pleasure, sir. We will have you on again for sure. I know there's a huge time difference between us and the UK right now, so I understand you got to go. Matthew, if you can let everybody home know where they can find you on social media. Or
I can find me on Twitter. It's via cat. Anoji's going to put it in the description.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Matthew, thank you so much, brother, for coming on, and we do appreciate you, sir. And have a wonderful rest of the day, sir. Thank you.
I will do. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Real quick, and then we'll close it out. Again, big shout out to Matthew Murr, friend of the channel. He's family to us, and it was really cool having him back on again, all the way from the UK.
Oh man. We just heard that a viewer watches us from, I think, Tokyo. Is that right?
Yes.
Or Japan.
Yes.
Man, you just never know. You just never know, or what connections you're gonna make via this platform. So it's pretty awesome to see for sure. I
wanted to ask you real quick before we go. I just wanted to ask you. We talk about complexity and what have you, and then we talked to Wizard a lot about like Epic Universe, and he's kind of bullish on this whole thing about like Epic Universe can be kind of like, and we've talked about it, like built to sort of each land is its own kind of thing, right? The middle is like kind of like a city walk, and then they can cordon off certain lands for certain events and what have you. In your opinion, do you think that sort of creates a little bit of a layer of complexity in the Universal sort of dynamic, or it just depends?
I think it'll be pretty transparent for guests. I haven't reiterated to me yet again. This is not for the dailies, right? This is not for people walking in there. This is for corporate groups and events, after the fact, so as to get multiple bites of the same apple. That's what I constantly heard. I think the only complexity is
like at the daily.
What time the parks close. Or potentially could close in order to provide these, services and corporate events, right? If when these particular lands close in relation to the park,
right?
That I think is the only the only complex thing around it, and I do think that will be relatively straightforward. There might be a sandwich board, right, when you walk in saying, "Hey, the Super Nintendo World is going to be closing at 8 p.m. tonight. Regular park hours apply to the rest of the park." That kind of thing. And it's like, oh, okay. Right. Well, we just had to make sure to hit that early on. If we were going to, maybe hold that off when seeing the other areas of the park. That kind of thing. I think it'd be relatively straightforward. It won't be the verbal diarrhea that we have at the end of that Disney Resort advertisement clip there.
Absolutely. Well, Dre, thank you so much, brother, for coming on. Fantastic show. It was really good having Matthew on, getting his perspective. I he's really passionate on Disney in general, but really especially in regards to this whole Succession thing. So I really wanted to dive into that with him because I know he has a lot of opinions on that and really interesting guy. But Dre, if you can go ahead and let everybody home know where they can find you on social media, my friend.
Yes, the best place you can find me is going to be on Twitter. It's right down there at VashSky for all the, as Christine Waysons McCarthy would say, for all the
robust
discussion right there. OG, you got that?
Oh, yes, I
Walt
do.
Drop?
There we go. Take it away, Walt.
And there's the biggest bargain of all.
The biggest bargain of all, indeed. But for the absolute biggest bargain, I think it's going to be here at OG 55, where we have great shows like Orange Nerd, where we go into all kinds of stuff regarding the studio side of the equation, right? Obviously, the Succession, but also as it relates to other studios like Warner Brothers Discovery, Paramount, and so forth. We definitely talk about it on there. We also have Disney Family Man 23, who hosts the amazing George, I must say, who hosts Citrus Corner for all things Walt Disney World and Florida offerings, and my show on there as well, Freshly Squeezed, your source for juice, news, and info, squeezed fresh right from the Grove. OG, thank you so much for having me on, brother. This was awesome. This is a very interesting time, right, for the Walt Disney Company. Extremely interesting, and I do appreciate you have me on and having me be part of this coverage of this time, because I think it's particularly fascinating.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love having you on, and your family and channel would not be the same without you, Dre. Would not be the same without you. So you are always every video. I want Dre on every single video. I love Dre and your perspective and your passion for this stuff, Dre. So thank you for coming on, and thank you all for watching this episode of OG 55. What are your thoughts on Disney and their Succession? Who do you think is on the short list? Is it a name that maybe we didn't mention today? What do you think about the names we did mention today? What do you think about the theme parks we talked about? What do you think about Avatar, Way of Water, box office, all that good stuff? We would love to hear from you. Smash that like button. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye, everybody.
very much.